The First Estate, Religion in Review, with Dr. Russell Barber.
Today on The First Estate, we'll examine Jewish mystical meditation, talk about Bibles for the blind, and examine a new way to view television from a Christian perspective. Let's begin with Jewish mysticism. There's a school of Jewish thought which suggests that the Torah has two levels of meaning: its outer plain meaning and an inner secret meaning that can be revealed through mystical meditation. Here to make the point is Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, spokesman for Jewish mysticism. Thanks for coming, Rabbi.
My pleasure.
What is mysticism?
Well, mysticism is usually defined as a direct experience of God. And in Judaism, it has a particularly important role. I think people often forget that Judaism is an Eastern religion. The prophets were really mystics.
Mm-hmm.
And also in Judaism, I've always very often wondered what's the Hebrew word for mysticism.
Well, tell me about that. There's a connection, isn't there, between the Hebrew word and mystical meanings?
Well, in general, especially in Kabbalah, but even in general Judaism, you find the analysis of words very often yields a deeper meaning of what something is. And one of the words, the closest thing I could find for mysticism might be devekus, which means attachment to God. And literally means attachment, like you attach two things together. A person attaches himself to God. And this is what mysticism is, having the direct experience of the divine.
How long has mysticism been practiced in Judaism? It really has an ancient tradition, doesn't it?
Well, if you wanted to be pure about it, you can start with the prophets. As I said earlier, a prophet is really a mystic. Because how does a prophet get his inspiration? It's a direct experience of God, and this is how we define mysticism. But of course, it's usually known to us, Jewish mysticism, through Kabbalah. It seems that the prophetic tradition was somehow kept alive. Probably after the destruction of the first temple, it became a secret teaching, and eventually it was kept alive through the Kabbalah.
Define the Kabbalah for me. What does that mean?
The Kabbalah, well, the word Kabbalah really simply means tradition. That's all it means. And I think this is what I was saying, that let me also interject another interesting thing, that in the Talmud, the teachings of the prophets are referred to as Kabbalah.
I see.
And it seems that what Kabbalah was, the tradition that was kept alive, besides the general tradition of Torah and Talmud, was the tradition that was kept alive from the time of the prophets of how to keep this direct relationship to God.
But the Kabbalah basically is considered to be a collection of interpretations, if you will, of Scripture of a meditative nature. Is that right? Of a mystical nature? Well,
there are several branches of Kabbalah. They're not actually officially...
There's no book.
There's no book, since there's no catalog that says A, B, C.
Right.
But in my own study of Kabbalah, I found that there are more or less three basic branches of Kabbalah.
What are those three?
And the most familiar, of course, and that which is studied by most people who are considered Kabbalists, is the theoretical Kabbalah, which essentially tells you the mechanics of the divine realm. I think it's the easiest way of explaining the sphere of the divine spheres, the angelic worlds, the world
sort of a philosophical overview?
A philosophical overview, and that really explains the other two branches of Kabbalah. And not only that, but gives the underlying philosophy of Judaism in general. The second branch of Kabbalah, which in the past few years I've been spending a lot of time investigating, and incidentally, it's interesting, there are very few published books on the source. On this branch, to a large degree, to work on it, I've had to go through libraries and go through ancient manuscripts, very often transcribing them and translating them for the first time. But this deals with the meditative Kabbalah. This is actually how to attain this direct experience of God through meditation. What is Jewish meditation?
Yeah, let me, while you're talking about that, show the audience that here are three of your current books that you've just...
By the way, the second book there, the middle one, that can't be seen, Meditation in Kabbalah, I think was one of the first books that really opened up the whole idea of Jewish meditation.
Really?
Until then, people had no idea there was even such an animal.
But so we've talked about two categories of the Kabbalah. Just to recap, we've got the philosophical aspects of it, the meditative.
Right.
What's the third?
Third is the magical.
And what do you mean by that?
Which actually in folklore, or very often in literature and fiction, is the one that's most played up. Well, again, about very little is known. There is an aspect of Kabbalah, I would imagine, starting with the Book of Creation, which actually tells a person almost how to manipulate, not only how to manipulate himself to get himself closer to the divine, but how to manipulate sort of the strings of creation, or the forces of creation, and actually bring about changes in the physical world.
Would this be the category of the Kabbalah that uses amulets and shall we call them props or magical items?
Precisely, or for instance, the making of the golem would come under that.
You know, that brings me to the fact that regarding magical practices and so forth, the Bible suggests there should be no idolatry. And isn't it in Deuteronomy that it suggests that there can be no use of, what is it, chants and enchantments and witches and things of that nature? How does that jibe with the fact that amulets and these items can be used, hopefully, to change the physical world?
Well, here you have two levels. First of all, the Kabbalists themselves warn about the dangers of these things. It's not something that's taken very trivially. Second of all, in the very passage in Deuteronomy, the Bible goes on to say,